Tyler was working at the register when he saw the old man using food stamps and said, "The system is collapsing because of freeloaders like this." Edward listened quietly. But when the store manager learned he was a combat veteran, she turned to Tyler. "This man fought for your freedom. You will apologize to him or you're fired." Edward Michael Cooper, 71 years old, was a disabled Vietnam War veteran living alone in a small apartment in Riverside, California. Every 15th of the month after his government assistance check arrived, he would go to the local grocery store to do his monthly shopping. Tyler Blake, 22 years old, was a college student working part-time as a cashier at Valley Fresh Market. Tyler generally considered himself smart and successful, and viewed people receiving government assistance as lazy people abusing the system. That Wednesday afternoon, Edward entered Valley Fresh Market through the automatic doors. He had a small shopping list in his hand: basic necessities, bread, milk, canned foods, a few vegetables. A modest list, just enough to cover a man's basic needs. Edward's appearance was that of a typical elderly American. Gray hair, slightly hunched posture, old but clean clothes. Blue shirt, brown pants, worn sneakers. He had a slight limp in his left leg, the permanent effect of a shrapnel wound he received in Vietnam decades ago. The market was busy, afternoon rush hour. Families, workers, students, typical suburban grocery shopping crowd. Edward slowly moved through the aisles, carefully selecting each item. His budget was limited, so every purchase had to be carefully considered. In the dairy section while getting milk, a young couple next to him was talking loudly about exotic cheeses. In the produce section, there were customers selecting fancy organic vegetables. Edward focused on basic items: maximum nutrition, minimum cost. After completing his shopping, he got in the checkout line. There were a few customers ahead of him, but Edward waited patiently. Eventually, he reached Tyler's register. "Good afternoon," Edward said politely. Tyler barely looked up. "Hi." Edward began placing his groceries on the belt. Tyler scanned them mechanically, clearly eager to finish his shift. The total came to $47.38. Edward took his EBT card, electronic benefit transfer, food stamps, out of his wallet. When Tyler saw the card, his expression changed. He rolled his eyes, clearly annoyed. "EBT, huh?" Tyler said, his tone judgmental. Edward nodded quietly. "Yes, sir." Tyler took the card, but before processing it, he began making commentary. "You know," Tyler said loudly enough for other customers to hear, "the system is collapsing because of freeloaders like this." Edward was shocked but didn't respond. Tyler continued, "Able-bodied people sitting around, collecting government money while hard-working taxpayers foot the bill." Behind Edward, other customers began to feel uncomfortable. Some looked away. Some frowned at Tyler's comments. Edward quietly said, "Son, I paid into this system for many years." Tyler snorted. "Yeah, right. Everyone says that." "I worked for 40 years before my disability," Edward continued softly. "Disability?" Tyler repeated mockingly. "Everyone claims disability these days. Convenient excuse not to work." Edward felt humiliated, but maintained his dignity. "Son, you don't know my situation." "I know enough," Tyler said arrogantly. "I see people like you every day, taking advantage of the system while people like me work and pay taxes." This conversation was getting increasingly loud, drawing attention from other customers and employees. "Tyler," Mrs. Chen, a nearby customer, whispered, "That's not appropriate." But Tyler ignored her. "Ma'am, I'm just speaking the truth. These people need to hear it." Edward tried once more. "Young man, I understand you're frustrated, but you don't know my story." I don't need to know your story, Tyler replied rudely. I see the EBT card. I see an old guy not working. That tells me everything. At this point, store manager Susan García had heard the commotion and approached the register. Susan García was 45 years old, an experienced retail manager who had been working at Valley Fresh Market for 12 years. She also came from a veteran family. Her father was a Korean War veteran. Her brother was an Iraq War veteran. Tyler, what's going on here? Susan asked firmly. Just processing an EBT transaction, Susan. Explaining to this gentleman how the system works. Susan immediately sensed the tension. Edward looked embarrassed and uncomfortable. Nearby customers were visibly upset. Tyler, complete the transaction, please, Susan said sternly. Tyler reluctantly processed Edward's EBT card. The total was approved, groceries bagged. Edward took his bags and started to leave, clearly wanting to escape the embarrassing situation. But Susan noticed something. As Edward turned to leave, she caught sight of a small pin on his jacket, a distinct military insignia. Sir, excuse me, Susan called out to Edward. Edward stopped, thinking he had forgotten something. Susan approached him. Sir, is that a military pin on your jacket? Edward looked down at his jacket. He was wearing a small Vietnam service medal pin, something he rarely talked about but always carried. Yes, ma'am. Vietnam. Susan's expression immediately changed. Sir, were you in combat? Edward nodded quietly. 3 tours, 1968 to 1971. Susan felt her heart sink. She looked back at Tyler, who was now paying attention to the conversation. Sir, what unit did you serve with? 1st Infantry Division, Big Red One. Susan knew this was a highly decorated, combat-heavy unit. Sir, were you wounded in service? Edward hesitated, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. Purple Heart. That's why I have the disability rating. Susan's face went red with anger. She turned to Tyler. Tyler, come here, now. Tyler approached, not understanding the gravity of the situation. Tyler, do you know who you just insulted? Some old guy on food stamps? Tyler, this gentleman is a Vietnam War combat veteran. He was wounded fighting for our country. His disability benefits aren't freeloading. He earned them by bleeding for America. Tyler's face went pale. Susan continued, her voice getting stronger. This man risked his life so you could live in freedom. He paid taxes for 40 years before his war injuries prevented him from working. And you just called him a freeloader. Edward tried to de-escalate. Ma'am, it's okay. He didn't know. No, sir, it's not okay, Susan said firmly. Tyler, you owe this veteran a sincere apology. Tyler, now realizing his mistake, mumbled, I didn't know you were military. That's not good enough, Susan said. You shouldn't treat any customer that way, military or not. But this makes it especially shameful. Susan turned to Edward. Sir, I am so sorry this happened in our store. This is not how we treat customers, and it's certainly not how we treat veterans. It's all right, ma'am, Edward said quietly. No, it's not all right. Susan looked back at Tyler. Tyler, you have 2 choices. Give this veteran a sincere, respectful apology, or clean out your locker and leave. Tyler realized his job was on the line. Sir, I'm very sorry. I was wrong to say those things. I didn't know you were a veteran. Son, Edward said gently, you shouldn't treat anyone that way, veteran or not. Everyone has a story you don't know. Susan added, Tyler, Mr. Cooper earned his benefits through service and sacrifice. Food assistance isn't charity for him. It's part of his earned veteran benefits. Tyler nodded, clearly ashamed. I understand. I'm really sorry. Susan wasn't finished. Tyler, you'll be writing a formal apology letter to Mr. Cooper, and you'll be attending sensitivity training before you work another shift. She turned back to Edward. Sir, your groceries today are on the house, and I want to give you my direct number. If anyone in this store ever treats you disrespectfully again, you call me immediately." Edward was touched but protested. "Ma'am, that's not necessary." "Sir, it absolutely is necessary. You served our country. This is the least we can do." Susan went to the customer service desk and returned with a gift card. "Sir, this is a $100 store credit. Please accept it as our apology." Edward's eyes filled with tears. "Ma'am, you're too kind." "No, sir. We're not being kind enough." As Edward left the store, several customers who had witnessed the interaction approached him. Mrs. Chen, who had tried to stop Tyler earlier, said, "Sir, thank you for your service. I'm so sorry that happened." A young father with his children added, "My grandfather served in Vietnam too. You deserve better treatment than that." Word spread quickly through the store about what had happened. Other employees approached Susan. "Susan," said Lisa, another cashier, "we all heard what happened. That was terrible." "It was," Susan agreed. "And it's never happening again." Susan called an immediate staff meeting for the end of the shift. "The team, we had an incident today that cannot be repeated. A Vietnam War veteran was disrespected by one of our employees. I want to make something crystal clear. We treat all customers with respect, but we have special responsibility to honor veterans." She continued, "From now on, we're implementing veteran recognition training for all employees. We're also partnering with local veteran organizations to make sure veterans know they're welcome here." Tyler, who was required to attend the meeting, raised his hand. "Susan, I want to say something to everyone. I made a terrible mistake today. I judged a customer without knowing his story. Mr. Cooper is a war hero, and I treated him like garbage. I'm ashamed, and I promise it won't happen again." Susan nodded. "Tyler, I appreciate you acknowledging your mistake. But remember, this isn't just about veterans. It's about treating every customer with dignity." The next week, Susan followed through on her promises. She contacted local veteran organizations and arranged for the store to participate in veteran appreciation programs. She also instituted monthly sensitivity training for all employees. But most importantly, she personally reached out to Edward. "Mr. Cooper, this is Susan from Valley Fresh Market. I wanted to follow up and make sure you're comfortable shopping with us again." "Yes, ma'am. Everyone has been very kind since then." "Good. And Mr. Cooper, I have a proposition for you. Would you be willing to speak to our staff about your military experience? I think it would help our employees understand the sacrifice veterans have made." Edward considered this. "If you think it would help, I'd be willing." 2 weeks later, Edward Cooper visited Valley Fresh Market during a staff training session. Susan introduced him to the entire team. "Everyone, this is Mr. Edward Cooper. He's a Vietnam War veteran who served 3 tours with the 1st Infantry Division. He was wounded in combat and awarded the Purple Heart." Edward spoke to the employees. "I want you to know that I don't hold grudges about what happened. Tyler made a mistake, but he owned up to it and apologized. That takes character." He continued, "But I want you to understand something. When you see someone using government assistance, you don't know their story. They might be a veteran who earned those benefits through service. They might be a single mother working 2 jobs but still struggling. They might be someone who lost their job through no fault of their own." Tyler, who was present for the training, raised his hand. "Mr. Cooper, what can we do better?" Edward smiled. "Son, just remember that everyone deserves dignity. Everyone has a story. And sometimes the person you're judging has sacrificed more than you'll ever know." After the training, Tyler approached Edward privately. "Mr. Cooper, I want to thank you for not trying to get me fired. You could have, and I would have deserved it. Edward put his hand on Tyler's shoulder. Son, we all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them. You seem like a good kid who just needed to understand better. Tyler nodded. Sir, can I ask you something? What was it like in Vietnam? Edward paused. Son, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I did it because I believed in serving my country. When I came home, I worked for 40 years until my war injuries caught up with me. I never asked for handouts. I earned my benefits. Tyler understood. Sir, I promise I'll never judge someone like that again. I believe you, son. Months later, Tyler had become one of the most courteous employees in the store. He went out of his way to be helpful to elderly customers, veterans, and anyone who seemed to be struggling. Edward continued shopping at Valley Fresh Market, where he was now treated like family. Susan always made sure to chat with him, and many employees knew him by name. But the real change was in Tyler. He had learned that respect isn't just about how you treat people who can benefit you. It's about how you treat people when you think nobody important is watching. Edward Cooper had served his country in the jungles of Vietnam, carrying physical and emotional scars for over 50 years. But perhaps his greatest service was teaching a young man and an entire store team about dignity, respect, and the importance of not judging others. 1 year later, Tyler was promoted to assistant manager. In his new role, he made sure that veteran customers received special recognition and support. He also mentored new employees about customer service and respect. Remember, Tyler would tell new hires, every customer has a story. The elderly man using food stamps might be a war hero. The struggling single mother might be working 3 jobs. Our job isn't to judge. It's to serve with respect. Edward's impact extended beyond the store. Susan shared his story with other businesses in the area, leading to community-wide veteran appreciation programs.